and policy making. Thank you, Pak Budy, for your coming this morning. Before we begin, I would like to briefly guide you to our rundown. Yeah, please next. Yeah, my name Aswin Indra Prasta. I'm the Vice Dean for Academics, School of Architecture, Planning and Policy Development, SAPPK ITB. These are standard Zoom rules, yeah, for all participants. So all participants have to use their real name on their Zoom account. Access for participant is open 15 minutes before the lecture or the seminar starts. Participants are expected to fill the attendance link in this link, yeah, which will be shared by the admin via chat box. All participants must mute their microphone while not speaking. All participants may use the chat function or use raise your hand features to give feedback or to ask question. Okay, this is our rundown this morning, yeah. Opening by me, and then followed by greetings and acknowledgement by the Dean of SAPPK ITB, Dr. Sri Mariati. And then I will read the moderator of this session, Dr. Adiwan Aritanang, and give the session to the moderator. So Prof. Budy will be led by Pak Moderator, starting by read Pak Budy CV, and then followed by general lecture by Prof. Budy Resosudarmo, and then followed by discussion and question and answer session. And approximately at almost 11 o'clock, I will formally close this session. Okay, before we begin our session, let me introduce Dr. Sri Mariati to greet and acknowledge this session. Dr. Sri Mariati, please.
Yes, thank you, Pak Aswin. Distinguished Professor Budy, faculty members, student, and all participants. Good morning, good afternoon for Pak Budy. Warmest greeting from Bandung, Indonesia. Assalamualaikum. Yes, our School of Architecture, Planning and Policy Development is one of from 12 faculties and school at Institute of Technology Bandung, with the task to execute education, research, and community services in the field of design, planning, and policy development in built environment. Energy and climate change is, of course, closely related to the education and research focus at School of Architecture, Planning, and Development. Today, we have prominent speakers in this field who have deep experience in the field of energy and climate change. And in this occasion, on behalf of the School of Architecture, Planning and Policy Development, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Professor Budy for the willingness to share the experience in this webinar. I believe we will get fruitful knowledge from this lecture, and welcome to the webinar. Yeah, thank you. I will be back to Dr. Aswin.
Thank you, Ibu Sri Mariati. Okay, next, I will briefly introduce our moderator of this session, Bapak Dr. Adiwan Aritanang. He is the program director of undergraduate program of the regional planning. Maybe next, yes. Bapak Adiwan Aritanang is program director undergraduate program of urban and regional planning, School of Architecture, Planning and Policy Development at ITB. He is the assistant professor at the School of Architecture, Planning and Policy Development with the field of interest, regional economics, economic geography, and decentralization. Pak Adiwan, are you ready for conducting this session with Pak Professor Budy? I will give this opportunity to Pak Adiwan, ya, to briefly read Pak Budy or Prof. Budy CV.
Okay, thank you, Aswin, and also Busri for the introduction and the general information about our general lecture this morning. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Budy Resosudarmo. Um, and presently, Budy is the professor of Arnott Corden Department of Economics, Crawford School of Public Policy. He obtained his PhD from Cornell University and also his undergraduate from ITB. Budy has a wide range of field of interest for research, including economics of development, resources and environmental economics, regional science, agriculture economics, public policy, and interregional modeling. And also, Professor Budy has many important positions throughout his long academic career, including the member of Council, Regional Science Association International, and also co-founder and member of the advisory committee in Indonesian Regional Science Association, or IRSA, among others. Presently, Professor Budy also served as the editorial board member in various international academic journals, including Regional Science, Policy and Practice, Asia Pacific Journal of Regional Science, and ASEAN Economic Journals. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Budy to share your presentation this morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the school for inviting me, providing me an opportunity to give this public lecture. I appreciate friends in the school, Busri, Delik. Is that okay? Okay, so yeah, I appreciate friendship and an opportunity that has been given. So my talk will be general. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So I will talk about. Oops, not yet. Let me do one more time. Yes. So I will talk about a broad topic, and the talk will not be like just zooming on a detailed issue within this energy security and climate change, but rather than a broad brush approach, looking at the issue and why we come to that situation from an historical point of view. So a lot of my talk will not be precise, but hopefully providing a big picture and could encourage future work in more detailed aspect of what I'm going to outline. So the title that have been taken is on this history and future of energy security and climate change in Indonesia, and implication for design and planning. So I will also discuss a bit about governance, why the governance issue that happening, and then the implication of that system, and what are the main problems that we have, and what opportunity for the future. It's not complete, far from complete, but hopefully it touched some of the big issue. So a summary, more or less, not really a summary, but as an introduction, is the following. Yes, I do agree that Indonesia natural resources are diverse. You know, we have gas, oil, mining, commodities. So we are a diverse resources. And however, there is another fact that we also need to acknowledge is that it has been extracted for a long time, and particularly the large extraction happened during the colonial that could signify the future pattern on how we are actually extracting our resources. Despite one thing that to remember that I mentioned that Indonesian natural resources are diverse, but I'm not claiming that Indonesia is rich on natural resources. Yeah, because there are the following debate that typically happen on the persistent characteristic of how these resources extracted. Yeah. Well, one is on the government issue. There is this issue that the way that this resource is extracted is using a mechanic or a strategy in which state or elite capture those resources. Yeah. So some elite actually got the access. Oh, can we mute others because I heard some voice. So because of the elite capture, because of the channel on extracting the resources are exclusive, then the benefit of these resources throughout the society has been mostly skewed. Yeah. These resources has been important on the Indonesian economy. I would agree with that. Even during the resource boom, however, the resources is not abundant enough for the whole country. So I will discuss this argument as well. So again, I'm not arguing for that Indonesia is rich on natural resources. I argue it is diverse, and even I'm part of the people that think that Indonesian resources is not abundant enough for the whole country. And so the resources is not sustainable to push the whole economy so that the Indonesian welfare will be advanced. Yeah. Furthermore, these resources has also creating environmental problem, including climate change and as well as energy security problem. So this presentation aimed to broadly show the process of natural resource exploitation in Indonesia and offer you some material to discuss whether the above character persistently occur and ways forward to initiate some turning points. So that is mainly the kind of the outline, or not the outline, but the red lines that I'm going to talk today. And I think my time is about an hour. All right. So let's start from the colonial era. It is 350 years of colonialization, but try to just summarize in one slide. How can we characterize this colonialization? Well, number one, the Dutch, which colonial us, were mostly care about the most effective ways to extract resources from the colony. And it's not think much that the colony will be a new settlement area for them. Yeah. So if you read Robinson and Archimoglu, they make a big fuss about the objective of colonialization and the implication of development. And Indonesia could be categorized as one in which the motherland or the colonial country do not plan to create settlement in this country, but rather than just to extract as effective as possible resources from the area. So we are certainly different than Australia, for example. Australia also a colony area, and probably, yeah. But for in Australia or in United States, for example, but they were designed as a new settlement area. So the way that the Dutch extract and the strategy to effectively extract these resources, well, number one during the VOC era is to basically monopolize trade link to international market. So they don't really capturing the whole country, but they capture the link to international market. Yes, they actually exist in several places, but their main goal is anything out or in is through the VOC. But later on, when VOC bankrupt and the colony was taken over by the Dutch kingdom, the strategy changed a bit. So the Dutch actually creating a governance or a government system, but it just put it on top of the existing governance system with collaboration of some rule in Indonesia. So the Dutch look at, what is the existing system, and they just put on top of that. So now everybody has to basically report to the kingdom, and that is efficient for the Dutch because they don't have to create the whole system, and most importantly, they don't have to educate the whole system, while they are in a way effective in extracting the resources. Further step that the Dutch do is land appropriation, particularly using the cultural system in 1830, and then later on implementing the agrarian law in 1870. So what is important over here is that not only now the governance has been in a way efficiently controlled just on the top. The Dutch do not really, only in several cases, they actually go into at village level. But also now they capture land that is cannot be defined as private owner. And there are a lot of land in Java and outside Java, although the focus has been in Java and in Sumatra. And then the third is that inviting foreign investor to come in. So you can see that the style that the Dutch do is that take over the governance, make it effectively, but very efficient. Land claim or land appropriation to make it possible to do anything that they want, and then bring in international investor to coming in to extract. Yeah, the goal was to extract as much and as effective as possible. No need to pay attention on local condition, not much involved in local development, except probably on transportation in which they need it. Yeah. So the contribution of natural resources or Indonesian naturalization to the motherland, I would argue, is significant, but we need to also do not overestimate. It is actually not enough to fund the industrialization happen in the Netherlands during that era. So with or without Indonesia, Amsterdam is one of the major port for Europe. So it's not true that the Dutch could transform the country in 1800, mostly due Indonesian resources. No, they are actually successful as well as a kingdom. Now, but one thing to noted within the colony, the spillover to general local has been very low. And so the benefit has been skewed. Yeah. So the problem of inequality in basically benefiting from the natural resources is actually embedded on the strategy of extracting it. Yeah. So you just not simply it's a sentiment between the Dutch and the pribumi, but it is also embodied in the system because some of the pribumi actually receiving some benefit, particularly those who are collaborate within the Dutch government, but the general people do not. So there is one characteristic that we need to remember because some of them turn out carry on during the independence. So what is it Indonesia when the Dutch left? Yeah, you see this line. This line show GDP per capita in Indonesia, and this is using US dollar 2011. So if it is using the current US dollar, the number will be much lower. But this is this line showing Indonesia. You can see that Indonesia and Netherlands, the gap is quite big because Netherlands GDP per capita is about 9 times higher than Indonesia. Yeah. So the gap of development during colonialization is a big issue. Yeah. So clearly there is an issue. If we think right now Indonesia, we do have this gap between region in Indonesia. It's not a new thing. It's not the Indonesia new thing. It's even during the colonialization era, it has been there between the motherland and the West Indies. And another thing to notice that type of colonization might do matter. So for example, the Latin American, the Mexican or US are colonization for new settlement, which is the Arsimoglu argue. And you can see if you compare Spain and Mexico in 1950s, their level of development is almost the same. Yeah. Some of the better places in which the British also want to settle, such as Hong Kong, for example, or even Singapore, they are in a better condition than the general area. But also notice that Spain and Netherlands has different style. You can see that Malaysia and Indonesia, the gap of development is not new. It has been since we are independent. Indonesian GDP in a way is half Malaysian. We and India, the one that is actually in a way having a lot of similar characteristic. India in 1950 is poorer than Indonesia. So that is giving you a snapshot on what happened during the colonization, and when we start this as a country, what level of development we are. We are poor, but we are not as poor as India. Yeah. But we are, there is a gap between the Netherlands and West Indies, and the gap is actually immense. As well as there is differences between different type of colonialization and the effect of colonial area. And you can see comparing us with Mexico, with Malaysia, and even with Philippines. Yeah. So next, then we come to the independent period. I will just quick through Sukarno era. This is basically an adjustment process, a big of this period of contested policies, mostly about nationalization of many economic activities. However, the economic, in a way, relatively stagnant or decline. The good thing is probably it was the period of grooming technocrat that becoming important for Indonesian future development. Now, Suharto era, it is an important part of our history, particularly on development. Yeah. Now, when Suharto take over, the main strategy to develop this country can be summarized into the implementation of these three laws. One is Foreign Direct Investment Law, Law number 1 in 1967, which provide clear procedure for foreign operation in Indonesia, as along with generous tax concession for foreign companies. So one is incentive for international capital. Number 2 is Law number 5, 1967 on forestry, which basically put all forests under the control of the state. So more than 80% of land in one day suddenly become suddenly owned by the government, ignoring the fact that forest communities has been cultivating those forests or has been using those forests as their livelihood, and ignoring that Adat law actually has been controlling various forests in various places in Indonesia. So those forests in Kalimantan and in Papua, it's not really a free zone area. There are Adat that has been implemented for years in this area. And the law number 3 is this mining law, inferring also that all land within the Republic could be mined. So the next step is the maybe it's bad. Can somebody mute those things? Yeah, thank you. Some similar, so strengthening the role of military in government, in a centralistic government, protecting the implementation of the law. So these are a summary of strategy on how in 1967 the so-called New Order regime thinking about ways to develop Indonesia. Clearly, if you look at these 3 laws, they are all related to resource extraction. And some similar, and also putting military on top of the existing system is something that we have seen before. So there are some similarities in regard of central state capture phenomena, i.e. land appropriation, centralized existing government within this era, which is the New Order era, and during the colonialization. And the number 1 goal is also similar, aiming for effective resource extraction for growth acceleration in the country. The difference is that now it's supposed to be that the benefit distribute to the country, but the effective way of resource extraction is not something new, and it probably mimic what happened during the colonial era. And the effect is significant. If you look at this logging activities, just after the enactment of law number 5, 1967, forest concession was granted to France. Few years after that, logging activities is accelerated. You could see that the acceleration of logging activity happened just after 1967, and they are actually keep increasing until early 2000. And the good, some good thing is that this is followed by a processing wood. Companies start from plywood and later on pulp and paper. So that strategy is effective in terms of extracting resources from forestry. The second is that in terms of extracting oil mine resources, you can see that in terms of government revenue, the oil mine revenue suddenly becoming so big, it's covering almost 50% in 1975. It is more than 60% in 1980. It's dominate our government revenue, and it's most likely because we are so fast in increasing our oil production in 1970s, in 1980s. It could be a case of expansion, and later on we will see the implication of this accelerated oil and gas extraction. Yes, this increasing of extraction was supported by a good price of oil and gas in the 70s. And the one of good thing is that you see that this role declined, but the government later on substitute with different policies to mitigate the lower income of oil and gas. Now we see the impact of those activities on the economy and whether their activities is actually working in developing Indonesia. Well, number one, you can see that Indonesian economic structure changed significantly. So the process of extracting resources, so you got money to develop the countries, and particularly you want to develop the manufacturing and services sector, is probably working. And you can see that agriculture role quickly decline in the economy. Mining is actually increasing, so this is the period that we have the mining boom, but it then declined, and Indonesia was able to substitute those decline in agriculture and mining with manufacturing and services. So manufacturing and services do develop in Indonesia using the initial fund that we got from natural resources. So in terms of the implication to the country, the strategy is not 100% bad, or later on we also see that maybe it's not also 100% good, but it's worked in making Indonesia develop. So it's not all negative what been happened in the new era, but we can see that it's actually worked. And the Indonesian GDP in 1967 relative to other country during the beginning that we need to see is that the situation was bad before Suharto come in. Indonesia now is poorer than India. The gap with the motherland is like 10 times by now. And so 97 is a very bad situation. Indonesia was really on the bottom, and many academics said that we are part of the basket case, so country that will fail. Now, and if you see what the New Order Era strategy, you can see that this is the growth of GDP per capita of Indonesia. We are actually dominated the region. We are higher than Thailand in terms of growth rate. Even China is still over here, Philippines and India. So in a way, the strategy has been working. And if we look at poverty declined significantly from 1970 to almost 50% to by 2000 is about 20%. And if you look, development is in each area in 1970 until 1996, yeah, is all region are basically developed. However, it is also should be noted that some region develop faster. So if you look, compare Java and for example, Java and Maluku certainly grow slower than Java. Papua, on the other hand, if it is GDP per capita, is actually probably growing as fast as Java and Sumatra, Kalimantan. Sulawesi is actually growth next. So one point is that it is successful in terms of developing the country as a whole, but imbalanced development has been occurred during that era as well. And one other important aspect to note is that when this is looking at variation, provincial variation using GDP per capita, is basically relatively stable. But if it is only without oil, you can see that the variation is increased. So there is an indication as well as there is a possible of income inequality. So equality is actually one of big issue during this Suharto era. In terms of the successful pushing the country to develop, it is successful. But also note that Netherlands during that area also quite successful. Now the cost of those development strategy is possibly over exploitation on resources. And if you look at deforestation rate from 1990 to 2000, we are the highest. It's a country with the highest deforestation rate, more than double compared to Brazil. More than it's more than so much comparing to Congo, India, and other. So the problem of those strategy is not so much it's not successful in developing the economy, but the environmental issue was left behind. And some of the fact happening in almost all the big island, but the biggest loss probably Sumatra during those era. Now I'm quickly going to decentralization and democratization period. This is again a transition, but the most important thing to mention that we adopt Big Bang decentralization policies, enacting this law, the decentralization related law, and at the same time there was a process of democratization. This process, this period is also a process when we recover from financial crisis. So Indonesia, back to pre-crisis, the economy is in 2004 when SBY actually elected. Yeah. So several things to note differences in the governance of Indonesia. One, it is a more decentralized system of government. It is a much more democratic government, and also some law guiding the natural resources has been changed as well, particularly related to forestry. There's a new law on forestry, law number 41, 1999, which basically recognizing the right of adat over some forest area. So so now suddenly all forests is not owned by government anymore. There's this adat that also can claim on forest ownership. Military role in the daily government activities has been declined, although this gap gradually filled by the policy. So you can see that during this era, basically a centralistic control of government that was used to extract resources during the colonial era and during the New Order era has basically dissipated or almost gone. The balance of power is actually happening among various levels of government. Military role has been declined. However, SBY is also lucky. That was the beginning of an increasing prices of commodities, particularly mining and some estate crop. And so because of the system of the government has been changed, but the incentive, the market incentive is coming up, and that's strong, then what we will see is a sporadic resource extraction throughout the country. So resource extraction is actually increasing, but it's not really having one control. So one thing to note is that it is not anymore a clear phenomenon that this is a central state capture resources extraction. Yeah. Coal is increasing very fast since the beginning of SBA era, and Indonesia is becoming top 5 exporter countries. Despite comparing to the other 4 in the top 5, our coal reserve is much less. Indonesia coal reserve is Australia coal reserve is like 50 times Indonesia, but Indonesia export is actually as much as Australia export during this period. So you can also see that we are actually a rush in expanding resource extraction during this area again. But the system that we do, or the way that we extract, has been changed. It's not more possible to have this centralistic capture. It's still probably an elite capture, but it was different type of elite. On the implication of coal, I'm slowly moved to an energy issue, is also this intention to actually use coal as our main energy to basically support the development of the country. So coal is expected to increase to 33%. So the use of coal as our energy sources have been increasing, and the target is even more. Oil palm plantation is another resources that increasing fast during SBA era. One thing to note is that the increasing of oil palm plantation in terms of percentage increase is the highest is the smallholder. That is showing that the sporadic movement to extract resources, and it also shows that the balance power is not only focused on limited people in the center, but it could be already all over the places. I move, and that also has an implication on deforestation. Yeah, and again, Sumatra has to bear the highest problem. Most of the oil palm plantation expansion happened in Sumatra, but also in Kalimantan, though this mostly also, and this too is actually related to the mining activities. Not so much happened in Papua and in Sulawesi. Well, it's happened a lot also in Java, but this is probably due to urbanization. So, and if we compare our rate, for example, 2010, we are certainly among the highest, although during the early period of SBA is not that so, but the cost of all this development using resources cause our basically environment stock. So it was not surprised when in 2007, although this is using number in 2016, the world see that Indonesia come from nowhere, suddenly becoming the top 5 or the top 10 global emitters. Yeah, and the main one is due to deforestation and forest degradation. However, interesting enough to note that even if we only consider emission from fuel combustion, which is the darker one, we are still among the top 10 or the top 15. So the whole story that I've been mentioning, that the cost of the way that we develop the country is on our forest land. And so the implication is actually we are among the top carbon emission. And if you look on the ground, the destroy of our ecosystem is actually big on the issue of forestry. But we also notice suddenly that there's something wrong as well with our energy combustion, because even if we take out the emission from deforestation and land degradation, our emission from combustion activities is also among the top 15. Before I go more on the energy issue and on the climate issue, let's check whether what happened during SBA is actually benefiting the economy. Yeah. Well, when SBA take over the country, Indonesian position is already better. Remember that in 1967 we are actually poorer than India, and in 2004. Thanks for the New Order era, Indonesia is better than India. And we are not that far compared to China. Yes, we are still far compared to Malaysia. Philippines right now is poorer than us. And yes, we are not as close. Our differences with Thailand is also a bit bigger right now. Singapore by 2004 has been OECD. However, Netherlands has been very successful, and Australia also actually been successful. So although the growth rate of Netherlands and Australia during the New Order era is slower than Indonesia, but it is growth of a big amount of economy. So their accumulation is just faster, even though their growth rate is actually slower on the level. You can see that now we are actually our GDP per capita is so far comparing to the Netherlands. Yes, there is an impact of financial economic crisis. But remember, the 2004 situation is probably the situation in 1996. So Suharto did successful in bringing up us, so we are better than some of country in our neighbor, particularly Cambodia, India, and Philippines. And if we look at the growth rate, this is the period when China is just basically rocketing. Yeah, but Indonesia growth during the SBA era is not that bad. We are better than India, we are better than Philippines, even Thailand, Malaysia, and our performance is okay. So one thing that to note is that this extraction of resources, although it is not centralistic anymore, it does give a positive effect on the economy. However, you could also see that, and you could also, the debate is whether that is more effective comparing to the previous one. Is an open debate. However, the foundation of Indonesian economic growth up until the SBA era is still come from resource extraction. Despite that economic transformation has been happening during the late Suharto era, in which manufacturing and services has been able to develop using the money from natural resources. And that situation, furthermore development of service sector, in manufacturing sector, yes, it's happening, but has some limitation. So if you look at the development of region, you can see that now the imbalanced development is actually start to becoming problematic. So for example, Papua is actually declined from 2002 to 2017 in terms of GDP per capita. Maluku is basically stagnant. Yeah. Some other region are developed, and Kalimantan probably and Sulawesi probably the most successful one. But the problem in Eastern Indonesia is actually becoming much bigger after after the fall of Suharto. So this is a hypothesis. The sporadic resource extraction due to sporadic power, yes, it still got positive for the whole country, but it could not prevent the inequality development of the country, because our economic development per region has been becoming more unequal. So then we come to this SBY period, end of his period. He actually realized that, well, this emission issue could be Indonesia future problem in international negotiation. And so in 2010, he basically added pro-environment to his other development mantra, which is before only pro-growth, pro-job, and pro-poor, but after 2010, he said that I'm pro-environment. And he made an announcement on Indonesia commitment in 2009 that we are going to reduce our emission by 26% as business as usual, and 41 if we have this international support. He did make a commitment to do that, and I'm going too fast. And he set up basically an REDD agency trying to handle emission carbon from forestry. Now the Jokowi period come in 2014. Unfortunately, his Nawacita does not reflect priority on climate change or environment. Instead, his priority is in infrastructure development. That has an implication, no priority in environment. Basically, you could see that he merged the Ministry of Environment into the Ministry of Forestry. It's a pro and contra, but in reality, the Ministry of Environment is absorbed by the Ministry of Forestry, not the other way around. And he demolished the REDD agency that's supposed to handle carbon emission from deforestation. And so it's not clear what is it our national agency that working on those issues. Yes, there is this gambut agency, but it is not specifically on REDD material. And the other thing is that, however, so because of his focus on infrastructure, is always trying to find money to do that. And so one of the major policy that he did at the beginning of his period is basically remove gasoline subsidy and fix subsidy for diesel and kerosene. And this turned out to be one of the most important Indonesia climate change policy, because those eliminating of subsidy would probably reduce emission from the energy by about 3 to 5%. So fortunately, his endeavor to seek resources is by eliminating subsidy, which is then benefiting the climate, our emission issue. Now, I'm back to the energy issue. So during his era, both during Jokowi and during SBA era, Indonesia has been growing at 5%. And the energy sector is actually also growing that way. And this is why the Indonesian energy by 2016 has been a big issue as well. And two things why that happened. One is that our energy intensity, or the way that we use our energy, is not as efficient as it should be. So if we compare to China, this is relative to China, we are actually becoming not efficient. Not like Vietnam or other countries in the region. Basically, they are more efficient than China. But we are actually, yes, it is more efficient, but we cannot catch up as the speed of China and the region basically improving their efficiency in energy use. And also the role of coal over here, we can see that keep trending up. And this is continuation of SBA strategy. And then Jokowi also do not have any attention on environment. Coal use has been growing up. And if we look at this is the CO2 emission from oil and gas, the main driver of our CO2 emission are this use of coal. Yeah. Now I will show you this map. What happened in our crude oil production by 2012? We are basically not net export anymore, and this could be because the overexploitation that we actually started in 1970s. So what is this left over here? Yes, we still have oil, but the cost to extract it is not as cannot compete with other country. So we start this implication. The other implication of extracting our resources so fast. Yes, it's good for funding our development, but it's problematic toward our environment. Now it's actually problematic toward our energy, because for growth we need energy, and our energy resources and our energy reserve has been declined. Additional to that is the issue of CO2 emission. So this is reminder. All right. So, and the other aspect during the last 5 years is that our poverty has still declined, but the decline is not as steep as before. So there's another additional issue that we have currently due to the activity before. It's been successful in terms of developing the country, but inequality has been always an issue. It becoming worsening after we adopt decentralization, and now we can see also the impact on poverty alleviation has been slowing down. So we need to think for future development. There are several aspects that we need to think. Number one is that, well, we know that our energy or our resources is probably now is already much less than before. Yeah? What are the source of, what are the driver that we can use to push our economy? It's becoming more difficult to push our economy using natural resources anymore right now. And on top of that, so that is the big aspect, and I will not chat. So in the last 20 minutes, I will shift to only focus on the smaller aspect. For development, if suppose we have money from somebody else, some other else, which is one thing is foreign direct investment, because Indonesia is so attractive, a big country and so on. Yes, we could develop, but there is this issue on energy that we need to tackle, because our resources to supply energy, and energy is needed for supporting future development, is an issue. And coupled up with that, that we don't have enough energy, is this environmental consequence, as well as whether we actually use the policy in securing the energy to also support poverty alleviation, in which becoming much more difficult these days. So now I'm focusing to a micro issue. For future, two of the possibilities on securing our energy to support development are doing two things. One is regional energy integration. So we basically connect our energy system to the region, could be Southeast Asian region, or could be East Asia, could be oil, gas pipe throughout this region, or electricity cable network connecting the country. So if you are fully connected, you could actually, as long as you are rich, you could actually buy. And developing a market of energy system. The second option is, well, starting right now, we need to think about extensive use of renewable energy, particularly solar, wind, and hydro, because that is could secure our energy resources. We supposed to be also diverse in terms of solar, wind, and hydro. We haven't really used it much, so the potency is bigger, and it's good for the environment. But we don't know whether it is actually supporting the economy and poverty alleviation or not. So now we have this COVID, in which the growth is actually in a way negatively affected. Yes, we have difficulties in come up from this COVID, but we should also see that the COVID is, if before we always trying to keep running, and this COVID is an era to basically slow down and think whether we are actually in the right path. And we should use this opportunity. Yes, we need to handle COVID and so on, but we need to use this opportunity to basically shifting the path of our development. The number one is certainly on, our dependency on natural resources. I do not cover any more of those issues, but now I focus. One of the implications of what we did with our natural resource extraction is this energy issue, and now I'm just going to focus on energy issue. So this could be the time in which we actually think about the strategy to change the path of our energy utilization. And many countries using this COVID, yes, we need to focus on resolving the problem, but as Ross Garnot said, it is a period of reset. So the thing that is not in the right direction, this is the time to reset. Energy integration is not a new thing. It has been discussed, and some countries like Thailand, Cambodia has been connected. And so the implementation of energy connection within this region, Southeast Asia or East Asia, is it's not just a talk, but it is a movement that is happening. So Indonesia should be ready. And on renewable development, it is also not just a talk. Other countries did expand their renewable. So look at China. The size of the renewable increasing so fast in the last 10 years. This one is in Vietnam. This one is India, and this one is Indonesia. We are very slow. So we have the opportunity to be at least as big as Taiwan, Vietnam, or even closer to China. So the opportunity of renewable energy is there, and we have seen our neighbors has been able to successful developing these energy resources. The other big movement that is happening combining this regional energy integration and renewable energy is Australia attention or Australia intention to basically supply electricity through renewable energy in Western Australia to Asia, and it will be through Indonesia by putting underground cable. And Indonesia has an interest as well to put underground cable to all Indonesian islands. So this could be an opportunity to combine international intention with domestic interest. So we shouldn't be like anti, somebody is doing this, we anti, but rather than make use that as an opportunity to develop and to secure our energy system. So in the next presentation, I will be quick browsing research that I'm conducting, basically looking whether an energy integration or development of renewable energy in Indonesia would actually get a positive effect on the whole economy, and whether there is reducing poverty as well. So this is a simulation that we do with some friends with my group over here. First, looking at using a social accounting metrics technique combined by household micro simulation and carbon emission model to check the effect of energy integration within East Asia and renewable energy development. So several so this data set is coming from GTAP. So we are basically comparing if Indonesia just do business as usual, supplying its electricity using oil, gas, and coal, and if there is an energy integration, which is one is energy integration in Southeast Asia, and the other one if integration the whole East Asia, and then we also compare business as usual if we develop hydro, micro, and coal. The result in general is those policies is effective in reducing CO2 emission. Energy integration basically do not really benefit GDP because the multiplier effect is not there. Comparing to business as usual, at least the coal, oil, and gas are domestic, so you got multiplier. But however, if you substitute those coal, oil, and gas with renewable, the GDP is actually positive. And if we look at the effect on poverty, while the regional integration do not provide much benefit, but the renewable energy is actually effective. So one issue with regional integration is that although it's effective in developing, reducing the carbon, but the effect of economy comparing to business as usual is not favorable. So, however, regional integration will have further possibility for us to implement other policies. So the two policies that possibly happening after regional integration is energy subsidy elimination. And second is carbon tax. Energy elimination, so two countries in the region that still subsidize their energy is Malaysia and Indonesia. We don't have much benefit to subsidize energy because our energy system is integrated. If we subsidize our energy, our subsidy could be leakage to other countries. So then there's much strong incentive if this energy system is integrated to eliminate energy subsidy. Second is that there's a possibility, much possibility to implement carbon tax because everybody doing it, and so we are confident to do it. And using a different system, recently I worked with the team over here to analyze the effect of energy elimination subsidy and carbon tax if energy integration is happening. So we use a CGE over here. And in general, the policy is that the first two policy, if Indonesia eliminate subsidy and recycle or distribute the amount of saving for social safety net, so cash transfer for the poor. The other two is carbon tax of 10% and use 50% of the income from the carbon tax for supporting the poor through cash transfer for the poor. And this policy is also effective in further reducing the CO2 emission. So if the energy integration actually creating about 3%, and on top of that, this elimination of any subsidy or carbon tax could actually add more emission reduction. And energy subsidy actually, removing of energy subsidy is positive to GDP because it's eliminate distortion on the economy. And so it actually could compensate the unfavorable result from energy integration. And the effect to the poor, particularly when we recycle to the poor, is actually reducing poverty a lot. And so lesson learned for all of this, particularly on the last one, is that, well, we probably need to implement the 4 policy option to get what we want, which is basically controlling, securing our energy for economic development, and 2 is controlling our carbon emission, and 3 is supporting poverty alleviation. So I come to the end of my public lecture. I'm not going to have a comprehensive final remark, but I just want you to know that, the way we govern our resource extraction does matter in terms of whether we are successful or not in developing the country, and whether or not we are overexploit has a consequence, not only on the environment, but later on is also back to the economy. Once if the economy is actually could not grow as fast as we want anymore. But second is actually there's a threat to the economy because we don't have resources, and we don't have, and in this case I choose we don't have energy. It actually could threaten the sustainability of our growth. So what has happened throughout Indonesian period is actually in a way could be something that indicate that we will have an issue for sustaining our development. And so the way to look way forward is that, one, we probably cannot depend much more. Yes, we still can in some degree, but it's not like before, depend a lot on developing this country using our resources. And so there's a need to have this much significant transformation. Yes, we have been successful during the end of Suharto era, in which basically increasing the activity of our manufacturing sector and services, but the increasing of manufacturing sector has not have been happening after decentralization era and up till now. So that is an issue. But there is also an issue that slowly coming up, which is our energy might not be enough to support our future development. And so working on this energy issue is also important. So with that, I ended my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to this lecture. Can I take a break for a while? I need to take some water, please. Yeah, ready, Pak.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Budy, for the insightful lecture. So with this, I would like to invite comments or feedbacks from the audience. You can chat or raise your hand so you can ask the questions to Professor Budy. So we have Pak Sugiantoro. Please, Pak.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Pak Budy, for your comprehensive as well as deep analysis of Indonesia's or our country situation. I feel sorry and maybe regret to see the experience of our country in I would say maybe spending too much resources, extractions, yeah, for maybe in unwise decision, something like that. However, I would like to see the possibility of energy integration, as you explained, that this could be one factor to increase the GDP growth. But do you think, or do you consider that the cost of energy integration might be the main hindrance of problems in the process to increase the GDP itself? As you may be aware of, the spread of our country area, its combination between land and waters. There's so many islands, and I had experience. It's not experience, but I know the process that last year ADB supported to connect the energy between Java and Bali with a tower around 300 tall meter to connect between Banyuwangi and Bali. But then last year it has been terminated, although the process had been going on for around 3 years to make sure that that connection happened. But then for Kalimantan, we imported energy from Kuching, from Sarawak, to support West Kalimantan. So we are now developing long cable high voltage network. And it's still going on, probably this year or next year will be completed. And then the third one was the information that one startup from New Zealand has developed wireless high voltage connection between areas. That one could be one possibility to connect or to integrate transfer of energy between islands. While your maps showing the integrated energy system by, I mean, from Australia, Indonesia, and Singapore by sea cable. So if this is one factor to increase the GDP by using low carbon emission, or we say renewable energy, that integration is one way to increase the GDP. Do you think the cost of those integration would be another problems? Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Subiantoro. Professor Budy, do you want to immediately to answer, or we can have three questions before?
Terserah. Up to you.
Okay. So I would like to maybe invite another two questions from Bu Madeline.
Okay, good morning. Is my voice in there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good morning, Professor Budy and all of my colleagues. My name is Madeline Abigail from the second year architectural bachelor degree, and my point of view will be from development. So I've always noticed that other countries economically grow faster because they can engineer the count of people and the variety in it and the natural source into good value of money. But this is what I haven't really seen in Indonesia. So Indonesia has one of the biggest natural oil and gas source in the whole world, and we can all agree on that, and that we are using it quite enormously for the use of our people. As we can clearly see, recent and future development aims on reducing the natural or oil and gas usage, and we tend to rely the usage from electricity, which is said to be environmental friendly because it doesn't dispose any harmful materials. But once I visited Python in East Java, and I was shocked that I saw this mass of coal radiated from the ocean belly piling up, waiting to be burned, turned into electricity that we use majorly in Java. So basically, Indonesia is still using renewable source to make an energy source that is said to be environmental safe. And let's say if we want to build a generator which is safer, it requires more money, big money. And we are already struggling with what we have. So do we really need to pay more for that? And the result from generator is just barely minimum, cannot fulfill everything. And to conclude everything that my point of view is taken is that electric steam power plant is still the most effective, and Indonesia has the source. So why don't we use it? What can we as the literal in the field suggest which energy source will able to occupy the 270 million people's energy needs other than coal? Because I still think coal is the most effective, while also we focus on the environmental and the climate situation. Should we just sacrifice one of them, money or the environmental? Thank you. Sorry if it's a little bit long.
Okay, no worry. So this can I just answer this to first part because it's related. So okay, so the issue of this energy, particularly related to electricity development, either it is on the issue of integration or on the issue of power plant. To me, is shifting, for example, from the current coal strategy that is cheap to renewable, is the number one issue. Is, I don't know, but it's not really about the cost effectiveness. So the main reason is this: cost of renewable energy keep declining. And in India, for example, the last auction for developing a solar park was 3 cents per kilowatt hour. 3 cents per kilowatt hour is lower than the current PLN cost, even with coal, which is around 8.9 cents per kilowatt hour. So what we see is that those costs has been declined elsewhere, and it's not happening in Indonesia. So that's number one. Number two is that, well, you know, Australia, as long as the it's permitted, will actually put a DC cable through the sea, goes to Singapore, and they are going to that far, and they think it is actually cost effective. So what is going on in Indonesia? Well, to me is number one, the governance of our energy is an issue. What is the governance of our energy? Yes, Ministry of Energy, yes, PLN, that one is the issue. Now, will somebody, will we get, for example, if we integrated our energy integration that Australia will develop, and then we cross with our energy integration throughout the island, will somebody is actually interested to fund? I'm quite confident that Indonesia is a country that one is the most, after China, the most attractive for foreign direct investment. Remember that all the graph that I've been showing, we were poor, very poor in when we were independent in 1950, and we are being able to be right now. And comparing, and we look at the growth, our growth is always among the top. Yes, in the last, during the SPA era, China is better than us, but for a long time, we are better than China. And even China is better than us, we are now better than India. So the attraction for us by international investor is there. One of the problem to me is that what is it inside this country that actually hampering those development? And what we need is to look at the mirror, and see that we ourselves is the problem. Yeah? And so in terms of coal, one of the issue with coal is that coal, in terms of generating the electricity, could be at the moment cheap, but as I mentioned, solar park right now could be competitive enough. But also the one problem with coal is that when we calculate coal conversion to electricity use, we never take into account the environmental costs due to the coal mining companies. If you visit some of the coal area, in particular the open pit, after they open up, they're not putting back the soil. They're just becoming an open up, and nothing could grow over there. So a vast area is basically becoming cannot be used for anything. Maybe houses, but it's in the middle of anywhere. So, but when we take into account those costs, coal energy utilization for electricity is expensive. It's expensive. So there are other issues that we do not take into account in many times when we calculate development, is that the environmental cost. And the environmental cost has been an issue, and I try to show you, is that the only one that persistent happening with the way that we develop this country is that we sacrifice our environment, and we keep sacrificing the Mother Earth throughout the time. And so at one point, you will have a negative effect that you could not reverse back anymore. Now, while we are still in the middle and has the opportunity to change the path of our development, we better do it. Yeah. This is a good time, and particularly on the case of energy. There's an energy, the cost of renewable has been declined, and it will most likely keep declining. The cost of DC cable has been declined as well, and it's most likely keep declining. And so what we need to set up is the governance within our country that could fit with what was going to happen in this region. If we are not being able to resolve that, then our performance comparing to others will be worse. Yeah. So that is I think my response. So Indonesia is still attractive for foreign direct investment. It's still, China, the other thing about China is they would like to have one belt, and one of the roads is actually connecting Indonesia with China. And the issue is certainly how you are dealing with China. It's not straightforward that you could get 100% benefit, but it is not undoable. It's not undoable. So, yeah, let me take another question, unless other would like to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Budy.
Yes, sir.
Could you also answer the first question related with energy integration would lead to maintenance costs?
Yeah, again, so the cost is, as mentioned, cost is, to me, is not the main one. The main one is the energy governance in Indonesia. So, and as mentioned that, connecting Indonesia is, in Europe, they're connecting all this island. Even they make underground train, it's from London to the middle of the Europe. So you could do it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I would like also to invite other questions, maybe from Reno.
Yeah, good morning. Is my voice in there?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Resosudarmo. I'm from architecture. I want to ask you about, so we know that every president wants some sectors to be improved, to be concerned. But let's see it from the general sides. Now, should this issue be put in the main concern, in the main issue? Because we know that from what Madeline said, we have limited money, we have limited resources, and what people say, we have another problem to fix, problem to solve. We have poverty and extra else. So now, should these environmental issues be put in the first or main concern? And the second question is, from the explanation, I still don't get it. What is the problem? What caused these issues? Is it because of the policymaker, the president, or maybe the senators itself? Or maybe is it about the system? Or maybe it's us that won't take it into the first or main concern? Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you, Reno. Would you like to respond immediately?
Okay. So, well, certainly, it starts from the people. The way that we, so if you see that in the early period of independence, for example, during the Suharto era, that the way that we extract or we develop this country is basically mimicking what has been done during the colonial era, is because that is probably the way that our leader educated. So it is certainly the main issue, or if you ask, the main source of issue is human. Yeah. And yes, the system is could be a burden. So for example, during the beginning of independence, even you have different thought about how to develop this country, but all the law and all the regulation that implemented was transferred from the colonial era, you have some limitation to do that. And also, right now, if you think that, well, something else that we need to do, but for example, on this energy integration, we should actually jump to this international movement on integrating energy. But because of the system right now, a strong state-owned enterprise monopolizing the electricity sector, you could not do it. So that's true. That is, we inherit a system, and it is hard to change the system. But history also said that, well, we did do a major change, for example, from an authoritarian regime during the Suharto era into a much more decentralization after 2001, basically. So then it's also showed that, you know, when human wanted the system could be changed. Although one thing that we also see that the change of the system does not guarantee that you are in a better off situation, but at least you could change. And so, well, the key is actually the human. Yeah, the key is human. And if you ask the human, then what is the key to change the human is the education. So that's why a core of development movement around the world is on education. Now, on education, there are a lot of different strategies. I think the philosophy probably in Western Europe is thinking that everybody should have a better education, but a more free market things that like US said that, well, to change US, you only need probably less than 1.1%. You know, you just need 10 more of Bill Gates. That's enough to change the whole nation. So that has been a discussion a lot. But the problem with Indonesia in terms of directing those changes, what is it institution that Indonesia that could produce those capable persons? ITB, maybe, but US has Harvard, has MIT, has Stanford, has some, it is small part of the university, but keep creating these people that is able to make a change. Now, the main question is in Indonesia is that, do we have those institutions that just create a few, if cannot create all, just a few that make that significant change and driving us to the right direction, which is the sustainable development path. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Prof.
Another from the audience, from Zimi.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Just want to take Mahatma Gandhi, one quote from Mahatma Gandhi that Earth provides enough for human need, but not for human greed. So I was in India for 1 year. So I was there for my postgraduate diploma degree. So I see, my comment will be based on maybe about the rural parts or rural sector, because I'm working in the rural ministry of Indonesia. So I saw so many program and subsidies for rural people, rural community, to utilize solar cell, solar power in India. So it's very easy for rural community to, if they want to establish the solar technology in their village. So many program, and it's so easy. Not like in Indonesia. I'm from Ministry of Village, but we are focused on economy. We are too much focused on how to increase our income, but I think we are forget about that Professor Budy mentioned before, that the cost that we need to pay for environment. And by the presentation, it's really clear about economy, but if we talk about social, so many social effect by the energy and resources exploitation. Because of that, so many displacement of people, they don't have their village anymore because of the coal mining activity. Even I'm from geology background, and I was working in the mining sector before become governance staff. But I realized that not only in economic but also in social, the resource of exploitation of resources really affecting people, especially in rural. And maybe question is, what is a role of planners? Because usually planners talk about urban. When we talk about urban, I think on my side, we will lose our rural. What will happen if we don't have any rural area, and because of the development, all the rural area
could you go to
become.
the question, please?
Yeah,
Could you go
that's
to
the
the question,
question. That's
please?
the question. Role of the planners and also role of rural community.
Okay, thank you. Budy, maybe you can respond to that.
Okay. So, well, certainly you can debate a lot on the role of a planner, yeah, because this aspect has been changing a lot throughout the year, and different country has different approach, and so the debaters vary. So if you look at the Indonesian history on the way that we use plan, which is Bappenas, you can see that in Suharto era it was effective. Yeah, and there are also countries that having a strong plan, which is such as Singapore, Korea has been able to graduate. It's probably different than Latin America, which is Chile, for example, which adopt a very strong market-oriented government, was actually successful. So the successful on the role of planning in developing the country has been varied throughout the nation. But what I said has been a consensus, I think, among economic development is what we call it an augmented market and planning. So what we probably need is that if it from the perspective of planning, it's probably a planner that is market oriented friendly. Yeah. While from the market oriented people, they probably say that what they mean is that Washington consensus augmented. So what does that mean is Washington consensus plus something else. So in Indonesian history, do we have a planner with market planning? Well, we do actually. If you think about the way that Wijoyo thinks, he is not a free market person. He's definitely a planner, but he is friendly toward trade, friendly toward foreign direct investment, and think that the focus on planning is more on provision of public services and controlling human population. So I guess the challenge for and also in environment, we know that market would not easily drive us toward a sustainable development growth, because a lot of the environmental commodities do not have a value. For example, clean air, biodiversity, and so on. It's not have directly value. So augmenting the market with the planning system is probably something to think about. However, exactly which balance that we need to have is challenging, and most likely each country should have different balance. Yeah, we probably cannot be as tight as Singapore, but cannot be as loose as the Latin Americans people. So that has really a challenge, and for you guys in School of Planning, it is something to think what kind of product that we would like to produce in this dynamic global development. So that is probably my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Budy. Unfortunately, the time has exceeded from our schedule. So if there are some questions also from the chat room, maybe we could discuss that later on. However, if I may would like you to respond, because the question from Padelik is very much related with our school. How could we answer that the energy integration would improve the security rather than expose the vulnerability?
Okay, so in term physical, it's most likely security, because then you are tapped toward more resources. But in terms of security, in terms of sovereignty, yes, that is an issue. Then you basically use an energy owned by somebody else. Now, so again, the key on participating on this arrangement is whether we are actually preparing ourselves in dealing with all these things. It's same as trade, basically. You know, you lower your tariff, you make sure that the other is lower their tariff as well. But if you lower the tariff and the other is not, you are basically fragile. And second, also same as trade, if your industry actually needs input from import, then it's also basically making your industry could be suddenly the input could be cut. So in terms of that issue, it's always happening when you interact with somebody else. And so what is important is not that we are not doing it, but what is important is that we're doing it properly and we know how to do it properly, because then you could reap the benefit of it. If you are aligned yourself with all this movement, then you are basically limited your opportunity. And history has told us that those who are not participate in international trade could not develop.
Thank you very much, Professor Budy, for the lecture. And we have exceeded our schedule for 5 minutes. So with this, I would like to invite the audience to have a big applause for Professor Budy for the interesting and insightful lecture. Thank you very much, Professor Budy.
Thank you.
And if I may, within the remaining time, I would like to put some summary from our discussion, just a very brief one. So I think the opening from the lecture from Professor Budy is very interesting, which says that the resources that we have is not abundant enough for the whole Indonesian society. So I think this should be remind us that we need a more effective and efficient way to extract and use our resources. And also the colonialization and new order regime implication remains to be felt until now. So there should be more and innovative way, I think, so for us to gain the benefit from the resources. And finally, what Professor Budy has remind us is that as students of built environment, the issue of energy integration and renewable energy remains a very important issue that we need to raise. And this also linked with the SDGs, I think, where students and the experts from the built environment could play a more important role in the future. So with that summary, I would like to close our general lecture, and I would like to return to to the Vice Dean of Academics, Pak Aswin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Dr. Adiwan. Professor Budy, thank you again for delivering such engaging presentation and topic that give us a holistic comprehension of energy and sustainability issue. Yeah. Fellow students, faculty members, and all participants, thank you for your attention to the lecture. Yeah. Before we end this session, please kindly turn on your camera because we will have a virtual photo session. Yeah. Pak Fikri, are you ready? Please give us clue, ya.
Oke, ready, Pak.
Okay. Please take the photo from each of slides, ya.
Oke. Slide 1. 1, 2, 3. Next. Slide 2. 1, 2, 3. Next. Slide 3. 1, 2, 3. Next. Slide 4. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, please be patient. We have almost 500 participants, ya.
Next. Slide 5. 1, 2, 3. Next. Slide 6. 1, 2, 3. Next. Slide 7. 1, 2, 3. Next. Slide 8. 1, 2, 3. Slide 9. 1, 2, 3. Slide 10. 1, 2, 3. Slide 11. 1, 2, 3. Slide 12. 1, 2, 3. Slide 13. 1, 2, 3. Slide 14. 1, 2, 3. Slide 15. 1, 2, 3. Slide 16. 1, 2, 3.
Ada berapa slide, Pak?
Slide 17. 1, 2, 3. Slide 18. 1, 2, 3.
19 slide.
Slide terakhir 1, 2, 3.
Oke. Oke, thank you Pak Fikri, ya. Fellow students and faculty members, let me remind you that we will again conducting webinar series on our recent research activities of our research division this semester, starting next week, September the 9th. So stay tuned and we will inform you our webinar agenda. Thank you again, Pak Professor Budy, for your participation in this general lecture, and thank you all for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and